The expansion for Scythe, called Invaders from Afar, adds 2 new factions to the game and increases the potential player count to 7. We're going to teach you how to play these factions in just minutes here today on Legendary Tactics. Invaders from Afar is an expansion that utilizes the original game components, and you are fine to mix this expansion in with them. However, if you are playing a 6 or 7 player game, there are 2 small rules changes that are required to make it work. The first is that one of the original Crimean mech abilities, Wayfare, is not useful in a larger game. There is a token included in Invaders from Afar that replaces that mech ability and allows a move to any unoccupied farm. The second is that Polania's Meander ability loses its effectiveness in 6 and 7 player games. If you are playing a game of that size, replace it with a new ability which allows you to pick up to 2 options per encounter card, and at the end of the game, gain 3 coins for each encounter territory you control. But let's take a look at these new factions, which incidentally are not recommended for new players to the game. The first, Albion, has a leader named Connor and a boar named Max. Their faction ability is called Exalt. After your character's movement ends, making sure to first resolve any combat or encounters in that territory, the player may place a flag token there from their supply. Please keep in mind that a territory can only have 1 faction token, either a flag or a trap, on it. Once placed, a flag token may not be moved or removed. These flags count as 1 additional territory for the purposes of endgame scoring for the Albion player if they control the flag token's territory with either a character, a mech, a worker, or even an unoccupied structure, and the flag token is not on a territory adjacent to the Albion home base. As far as mech and character abilities go, there are some interesting ones. The first is Burrow. This allows your character Connor and Max to cross rivers into or out of any adjacent tunnel territory. This includes your mine, which counts as a tunnel territory, although other players' mines cannot be used in this way. Then there are 2 combat powers, Sword and Shield. When you are attacking, the Sword ability forces the defender to immediately lose 2 power. This is reflected on the power track, although your opponent can never go below 0 on that track. With Shield, before you begin combat as the defender, you gain 2 power on your power track. Both of these abilities happen once per combat, not once per unit. Then we have the Rally ability, which happens when you take a move action. This allows you to move your character and mechs to any territory that contains at least 1 of your workers or 1 of your flag tokens regardless of the distance. The other faction is the Togawa shogunate. Their lead character is Akiko and her trained pet monkey Jiro. The Togawa faction ability is called Maifuku, which is an intriguing trap-laying mechanic. After ending your character's movement and any encounters or combat are resolved, the Togawa player may place 1 of 4 armed trap tokens of their choice from their supply and to the character's territory. This can even be in a territory with an opponent's structure on it. Remember also that a territory can only have 1 faction token on it, i.e. a flag or a trap. Once placed, trap tokens may not be moved or removed. Each trap token has an armed and a disarmed side. Because there may not be any enemy units in a territory with an armed trap, that armed trap grants the Togawa faction control of the territory for the purposes of endgame scoring. If an opponent moves a unit into a territory with an armed trap token, halt that unit's movement, flip over the trap token to reveal and apply the revealed penalty to the fullest extent possible. This happens before anything else, including a combat or an encounter. The trap token remains on the territory on its disarmed side. The penalties that the trap inflicts will be 1 of 4. The trap's victim has to either lose 2 popularity, lose 3 power, lose 4 coins, or discard 2 combat cards at random. Please make sure that the other players are aware of the possible penalties of triggering a trap before the game begins. Play fair. There is a way to counteract the trap's ability to control a territory. An opponent can build a structure in a territory with a trap. At the end of the game, if the only player tokens on a territory are the structure and the trap, whether the trap is armed or disarmed, the player with the structure controls that territory. Now let's take a look at the character and mech abilities of the Togawa faction. The first is Toka. Once per turn when moving, either one character or one mech may move across a river. The character or mech cannot move across multiple rivers when using, say, the factory card, only one. A mech can do this while transporting workers. The second ability is Scythe. This allows your character and mechs to move to and from lakes. If a combat occurs on a lake, as some other factions might encounter you there, you can play one additional combat card once per combat. If a mech transports workers onto a lake, or if a mech or character transports resources onto a lake, you cannot leave that behind after moving off it, nor can a worker move off the lake without being transported by a mech. You can't build a structure or deploy a mech on a lake, but you may place a trap there if you like. Next up is Ronin. Before combat, where you have exactly one unit, either one character or one mech, and no workers in either case, you may gain 2 power on the power track. And finally, Shinobi. When using this ability, your character and mechs can move to any territory with a trap token, regardless of the distance. Furthermore, in using this ability, if your character or a mech ends movement in the same space as a disarmed trap token, you may choose to arm the trap. If you are using the factory card's move action, you can't use this ability in the middle of a movement, only at the end. If combat occurs in the space, you can't arm the trap unless you first win the combat. We hope you're learning a lot from this video, and if you are, please consider liking and subscribing down below. And finally, just a few notes on how to play these factions with the Automa. There's no special setup required other than placing the flag and trap counters on the appropriate player mat. Make sure you randomize the trap tokens. All the rules from the original Scythe Automa rulebook are basically the same. Any traps and flags placed by the Automa have no effect on its movement, except that the character of an Automa playing Togawa sometimes moves to an unarmed trap. Traps placed by you can influence its movement though. In the original rules for the Automa, it says that as long as the Star Tracker token is on a space with a river with a slash icon on it, Automa units can't use lakes or cross rivers. When the Automa is playing as Albion or Togawa, Automa units have an additional restriction in that they cannot move into a tunnel territory as long as the Star Tracker token is on a river with a slash space. In the case of Albion, the Automa gets the ability to place flags. At the end of the game, these flags are scored as described earlier. Flag placement occurs when the encounter or factory action is resolved. After ending its movement, if the Automa has any flags remaining, place one on the territory with its character. In the case of Togawa, the Automa gets the ability to place traps, and these are scored the same way as described earlier. Similar to Albion, trap placement occurs when the encounter or factory action is resolved. After ending its movement, if the Automa has any traps remaining, place a random armed trap on the territory with its character. You do not get to see which trap was selected until it is triggered in the normal way. If the evaluation of the encounter or factory action does not present a valid move, if there are disarmed traps on the board, the character will move to the territory containing a disarmed trap and arm it again. This action follows all the rules of the encounter and factory action, except that the territory of the disarmed trap does not need to be in the neighborhood of any Automa unit to be valid. The Automa's character is able to move to any territory with a disarmed trap when taking the encounter or factory action. If there are multiple disarmed traps, choose the one that is the shortest distance from an enemy unit. If there is still a tie, use the normal reading order. While the Automa doesn't have any changes to its play while facing a player playing the Albion faction, there are some adjustments made for playing against a Togawa player. The Automa triggers traps and incurs penalties as in a normal multiplayer game, except for the trap which forces a loss of popularity. In that case, the Automa can trigger the trap, but there is no penalty suffered. To have the Automa actively attempt to trigger traps, territory with an armed trap is added as a new tiebreaker before normal reading order for all move actions against this faction. Hence, when choosing a destination, there will be 3 tiebreakers instead of 2 as follows. The first tiebreaker is the territory closest to the factory. The second tiebreaker is the territory with an armed trap. The third tiebreaker is normal reading order. We hope this video taught you how to add the Togawa and Albion factions to the board game Scythe. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you here next time on Legendary Tactics.